Oh, didn't see you there. But while you're here, I'm going to be walking you through the appliances and accessories on the Vintage Cruiser 19 CSK. So here we are right up front. We're going to go over the loading and unloading process as always. This camper is going to ride on a 2 5/16 ball, what we have here. The loading position is going to be with this slide latch unlocked. It will hold back in that unlocked position. You're then going to center your ball underneath the coupler, lower that jack back down on top until you're fully seated. We then go ahead and slide this latch lock forward. That's going to go ahead and lock us down on that ball. We want to pay special attention that both of our teeth here on that slide latch are fully engaged in the frame. Definitely a good idea to go back and also add a secondary pin here, whether that be of the locking variant or just a spring clip. Either way, that's going to keep this from rattling loose going down the road. Now, when you are hooked onto your ball there, you're then going to take your tow chains. We're going to cross those underneath the coupler. We're going to hook those onto the receiver of the vehicle. Pay special attention that these are, of course, crossed underneath the coupler, as well as that you have enough room to make your turns left or right, but not so much room that they may make contact with the pavement. Riding right next to those chains is going to be your emergency breakaway cable. Now, this is a very important piece of safety equipment. This should ride on its own separate connection to the receiver. The reason being is that if these other tow components were to become compromised, as the two vehicles separate, this is going to act like a ripcord to the electric brake system, keeping you from having like a runaway camper scenario. So make sure that we are using a separate third connection point on the receiver for your emergency breakaway. Also, we have your seven-way wiring here, and this is going to connect your two vehicles as one. This is going to give you full function to your tow vehicle's braking system, lights, charging system, things like that. Again, make sure you have enough room to make your turns left to right, but not so much room that this may make contact with the pavement. Hopping up here to your electric tongue jack, you do have a switch up top that's going to give you a light that's going to make things easier if you're doing any coupling or uncoupling after dark, or if you just need a point of reference, again, if you're backing up to the unit when it's dark time. Other than that, you have up or down operation on this momentary switch to allow you to raise and lower that when loading and unloading. You also do have a manual drive option on that jack. If we go ahead and remove this rubber plug, we have a manual crank handle that we can then insert. That will allow us to go ahead and crank that jack up or down in the event of a power loss situation. Moving right behind that electric tongue jack, we have our two 20-pound propane cylinders. These will be full for you at the time of delivery. Both are going to have an open and closed valve on the top, the same variant you're going to find on any gas grill. In between those, you're going to find an automatic switchover propane regulator. The idea being is that you are going to directionalize this towards your primary propane tank. Once you have used the entirety of that tank, it will automatically switch over to your secondary tank. Now, if you, in that time, want to take your primary tank to go get filled, all you have to do is go ahead and switch that over to your secondary tank. Removing these for service is very easy. You have an oversized wing nut here. You can go ahead and unscrew that. A T-bar is what locks those into place. Just go ahead and rotate that out of the way. Unscrew your pigtails here and then go ahead and remove them to be filled. That is all covered by a propane cover here. This is going to protect those tanks from being in the weather, as well as, rock damage or road debris, things like that. When you go ahead and put this on, make sure this door is opening towards the camper. That way it's not going to catch wind and potentially blow off. Now behind that, we have your brand new Interstate D-cycle battery. Now this particular battery is going to be a maintenance-free lead acid battery. But in the event that you were to change that battery to a lead acid battery, you would want to make sure that you are maintaining that water level. So on that style of battery, you're going to have two vent panels here. Make sure you're removing those vent panels and checking that water level every 90 days. Now down below that battery, we have your sewage hose holder. This will have a door on either side. This is just a separate place to go ahead and store your sewage hose. That way you're not having to keep it with your other stuff. Again, should accommodate quite a few sewage hoses that are on the market, but your longer 20 feet ones, of course, are not going to be able to store in there. First things up is going to be your stabilizer jacks. You're going to have stabilizer jacks on all four corners of the unit. Now, these jacks are for stabilization, they're not for leveling. If we're doing any leveling of the unit, we're going to use the main tongue jack up front or the tires in a leveling kit. So the front jack from front to back, leveling kit for left to right. Now, once you are within 3 degrees of level, you're going to go ahead and run these down. These are, again, going to just stabilize the floor, make it feel like you're not walking around on a couple tires. What you do is, of course, rotate this down, come down, make contact with the pavement, maybe a quarter turn more just to sure everything up. No need to go overly tight in either direction. Same on the way up. Just make sure everything is nice and snug. We also have your large pass-through compartment right up front here. This is a lighted compartment. You do have an LED light strip going across. The switch to turn that light switch is going to be on the passenger side of the unit. We'll make sure we get eyes on that when we make it over there. If you take a look down here, you're going to find that freshwater holding tank drain. It's very important that anytime you're going to be storing the unit for more than 7 days that we do go ahead and empty all of the water from the unit. After 7 days, it starts developing bacteria, things like that. So if we are storing the unit, we want to make sure it is empty of water. You only need to empty that freshwater tank if you have filled it. So we'll go through other low point drains and emptying the water heater and things like that, but keep in mind, I will reference that freshwater drain throughout this presentation. Here we have our potable water fill. Now this is how we're going to fill that onboard freshwater holding tank. You're going to make sure you go ahead and use this anytime you're doing any off-grid or boondocking. The idea being is before you get to your destination, you are going to stick a drinking water hose directly into the fitting. You're going to fill up to your satisfied. Once you are satisfied, you cap it off, of course. Now to pressurize the system, we have an onboard 12-volt water pump to pressurize that tank and draw that water up to the fixtures to make that water usable. Moving on here, good time to talk about slide out maintenance. What you have here is going to be the Schwintek system. Operation becomes pretty important. We do want to make sure that we avoid short bursts when it comes to opening and closing it. So we're going to open it fully, close it fully. Also, you're going to want to get on a 90-day maintenance schedule when it does come to the slide. What that means for you is every 90 days, we're going to go ahead and lube these tracks. We're going to use a dry silicone lubricant to do so. Just spray the track down, run the slide in and out a few times to distribute that lubricant, and you're going to be good to go for the next 90 days. Now keep in mind, you do have a track top and bottom, left to right. So 4 tracks total that will need that lubrication. Also, we have a seal that runs the full all the way around the slide out, and we're going to want to make sure we condition that seal every 90 days as well. So we're going to use an RV grade seal conditioner. We're going to spray that seal down, let it sit for a few minutes, wipe off any excess, and again, we're going to be good to go for the next 90 days. Now keep in mind, you do have a set of seals outside that we can see here. You also have a set of seals on the inside that will need that product sprayed on them as well. That brings us down here to your tires. Lug nuts, torque, and tire pressure becomes very important when we do talk about trailer tires. First off, the max tire pressure rating for this tire is going to be 65 PSI. That's going to not only be stamped in the sidewall of the tire at that more traditional location, there's also going to be a data tag up at the driver's side front corner that's going to let you know that tire rating if you are questioning it. With any camper tire, any trailer tire, we run those at the max. So that 65 PSI is going to give you the highest flexibility in terms of weight rating. Whether you're completely full or completely empty, that 65 PSI is going to be the magic number. Now, every manufacturer recommends a torque procedure for their lugs. Generally, what that's going to entail is the first 15, 25, 50, and 100 miles. We want to check and make sure that those are maintaining their level of torque. In this scenario, that number is going to be 100 foot-pounds. So again, in those intervals, we want to make sure we stop and we check the level of torque using a torque wrench. You're going to torque those lugs down in a star pattern, again, in those intervals. Here we are at the sewer outlet connections. we're going to talk about how to dump the unit, hook it up to septic, things like that. So if we go ahead and look at these handles, they are labeled here on the body. Sewage holding tank is going to be black water. Black water is going to be anything that comes from the toilet, body waste, things like that. And then our wastewater holding tank is going to be gray water. That's going to be the relatively cleaner of the two. You're looking at sink water, shower water, things like that is going to go into the gray tank. Now it's important that you operate these correctly to prevent any like cross-contamination issues, things like that. So keep these valves in the closed position until it comes time to dump. We do want to make sure that we keep both of those holding tanks in as wet or flowing condition as we can, especially with this black water tank. You're not only going to have that solid body waste, but you're going to have toilet paper, things like that. We want to keep that in as wet or flowing condition as we can so it will easily evacuate that tank when we do go ahead and pull that blade valve. Keep in mind that we want to make sure that we do not have these valves open at the same time. It's our goal to avoid any cross-contamination or backfeeding issues. So what a popular option is for our customers is going to be dumping the black water first. Once you are satisfied with that, you're going to, of course, close that valve off. You're then going to open up the gray handle. What that's going to do is rinse any shared plumbing between the two systems, as well as rinse your sewage hose out as well. Now, when it comes to connecting, you're going to connect your sewage hose the very same way this cap comes off. What you're going to see here is 2 keyholes on both the sewage hose and the cap here. And then we'll see 4 prongs here on the actual dump location. So you're going to put your keyholes in the halfway position. You're going to give it a 1/4 turn. That's going to go ahead and lock it on. And then you're going to be hooked up to septic and ready to dump. Also, down the line from those dump valves, we're going to have our low point drains. Maybe a little hard to see. These are going to be the lowest part in the unit's plumbing. So this is how we're going to drain the water lines. Everything in between water source and fixture is going to be drained from this location. Again, you're going to want to dump the unit of its water if it is going to be in storage for more than 7 days. Start with the freshwater holding tank. Again, if you have filled it, then you're going to come down here and you're going to remove these 2 caps. Those are again going to dump that to and from plumbing. Lastly, we're going to drain the water heater. We're going to talk about that when we get to that, but if you have done those things, the unit is ready for storage and it should be clear of 99% of water. Here we have our black tank flush. Now pay special attention. You have your black tank flush here on the left and your city water connection on the right. Definitely do not want to confuse the two. So this is an excellent appliance. The black tank flush is an excellent appliance to help keep that black water tank nice and clean. The idea being is that you can go ahead and hook up any old garden hose to this, hook that to water, and with that black water valve in the open position, very important that it is in that open position because we do not want to overfill that tank. But the idea being is that this corresponds with a jet inside that black water tank. And again, it's specifically designed to help blast off any of that compounded toilet waste, body waste, things like that. So very important appliance to use and make sure we're using it correctly. And I would also say that you're probably going to want to use that every single time you're planning on returning the unit back to storage. It's going to help keep those sensors nice and clean and again, blast off any of that extra stuff that you just couldn't get out by dumping the unit in the more traditional sense. As referenced, right next to that's going to be your city water connection. This is what you're going to use if you're in the capacity of an RV park. Anytime you are hooked up to full-time running water, it's going to be at this connection here. When we do talk about that city water connection, water pressure becomes very important. It is extremely important that we always use a water pressure regulator. We have included one with your purchase today. These units are generally rated for a running water pressure of 50 to 75 psi. This water pressure is going to keep that within that range. So this water pressure regulator, I should say, is going to keep that within that range. We're going to hook this directly onto our water source as close to our spigot as we can. We're then going to take our freshwater drinking hose and hook that directly to that water pressure regulator. We are then going to take the hose side and screw that onto the trailer bound connection by rotating that connection on the camper. Make sure things are screwed on nice and tight. If you need to give it a couple wraps of Teflon tape to avoid any dripping, things like that, that's what you're going to have to do. Right next to that, we have a spray port. Now, this is kind of a cool appliance. This corresponds with a coiled spray hose. You're going to find that on the interior of the unit. It's going to utilize a quick connect fitting here. So the idea being is you slide this locking collar back, insert the male end fully. Once it goes ahead and locks on, it's going to automatically pressurize, and that's going to allow you to, again, use that sprayer. Now, it may be slightly difficult when that hose is under pressure to go ahead and remove it from this location. If the event that that happens, just go ahead and depressurize the unit and then, empty out any pressure from the hose, and you'll be able to easily remove that from there. And then down below that, we have cable satellite inlets. Now, these are just pass-through connections to feed TV services to the unit. Whether that's going to be a park cable service or an aftermarket satellite package, you're just going to utilize these standard RG6 cable fittings. They will terminate at the designated TV area of the camper. And right next to that, we have your 30 amp 110 volt power supply. This is your cord, does come with the unit, and it's only going to plug into the camper one way. So if I go ahead and disconnect this and I look here at the receptacles, I have two slanted receptacles and one L-shaped, corresponding prongs here on the plug. If I go ahead, line everything up, it's going to plug straight in. We're going to give it an 1/8 inch turn to the right that locks it on. And then we have a secondary collar here to screw down and secure that connection further. Now, it's going to be my recommendation for every unit that I deliver is that you upgrade this further with the use of a surge protector. It's very important. We generally have a lot going on within these units electronically, so it becomes very important that we protect that from dirty power, environmental surges, things like that. The only way to do that is going to be with the use of a surge protector. If you have any questions on the parts that we recommend or how to use them, feel free to give our parts department a call. They would be more than happy to educate you on what we recommend. Here we are at the rear of the unit. Of course, you have your traditional stuff like tail lights, marker lights, things like that. Also up top here, we're going to find a pre-wire for a aftermarket backup camera. Gulfstream in this instance has made it very easy for you to upgrade that at a later date. It's essentially going to be plug and play with whichever camera system that you are inclined to install. Dropping down low here, we have your refrigerator vent. Not a lot of maintenance that this is going to entail. What we do want to make sure that we are doing is removing the cover, which has already been removed. And we're going to give it a visual inspection every 90 days to make sure nothing has gotten in there, nothing's nesting in there, things are as clean as possible, things like that. So keep in mind that although you're not going to be actively working on this appliance, that you will want to inspect it every 90 days. The biggest thing you can do to keep it in good working shape is operating it with the unit level, and we say within 3 degrees of level will keep this thing working properly. And then also you're going to want to keep any mud daubers or flying insects from nesting within the compartment itself. To do so, you're going to use some specifically cut bug screens. We're going to install those over the vent cover here, and then again, that will take care of that issue. When it does come to installing or removing this vent cover itself, you can see you have some slots here down at the bottom. We're going to insert that. And we're also going to want to make sure that our drainage hose is poking through one of these, or at least if you have the bug screen installed, is resting up against there, so any condensation from that refrigerator can of course drain out from the compartment. Once you've done so, you're going to line up these prongs with the corresponding holes, and once everything is sitting flush here, you can go ahead and lock those tabs down. What that's going to do is keep that in place. I always go back and give it a tug there to make sure that it is not going to come loose when I do go down the road. Right below that, we have your furnace vent. Biggest thing with that is we're not going to want to obstruct that opening at all. Not only does it blow very hot air when it is on, but it is an exhaust, and it is an exhaust vent and will need to exhaust. So no lawn chairs or anything over that. And also it's an excellent place to, again, add a bug screen to keep any mud daubers and flying insects from nesting within the appliance itself. What we have here is going to be your 6-gallon capacity water heater. This particular appliance is going to be a dual source water heater. What that means is it has a 110 volt heating element, and it will also heat that water using propane gas with 12 volt direct spark ignition. If we go ahead and take a look at the appliance itself, we do have a toggle switch down here below that propane regulator and gas valve, and that's how we're going to turn the electric heating element on. Now you can use both sources if you're inclined to do so. That is going to give you the highest recharge rate. The one issue that I do find with people using that 110 volt heating element is that when they are through using the unit, then we return it back to storage, they actually forget to turn that switch off. So make sure that you are taking a note of the orientation of that switch so we can only have it on when we are actively heating water. Now, manufacturer also recommends a very kind of strict maintenance guidelines for this particular appliance, not only from a safety standpoint, but they do just want to keep things as fresh as possible within the holding tank of the water heater. So again, this is going to go with everything else that I've referenced. If the unit is going to be in storage for more than 7 days, make sure that we are draining this water heater separate of the rest of the system. So first things first is we are going to cut the overall inflow of water to the unit itself. If we are running off our city water connection, it's just as easy as turning the valve off at the water source. And if we're running off the potable water tank, we're just going to flip off that 12 volt water pump. So with no new water running into the unit itself, we're then going to go to the hot side of any water fixture within the unit, whether that's the bathroom sink, kitchen sink. Either way, we're going to open up the hot side of that plumbing. We're going to allow that pressure to bleed off from the fixture itself. So you may see a little bit of water, you might see a little bit of steam, things like that. Once you have depressurized it at the fixture, you're safe to drain it. We're going to then come back outside and we're going to use this 1/16" drain plug to go ahead and finish draining it. So use a socket, generally an extension and a ratchet, and go ahead and back out that 1/16" plug. And as long as you have depressurized the unit, you're not going to be in any danger or anything like that. So you'll see the remaining 5.5 gallons or so of water be evacuated from this location. Now that drain plug pulls double duty. It's not only a drain plug, but it is also an anode rod as well. What an anode rod does is acts like a magnet for hard water deposits, calcification, things like that. They deposit onto that anode rod and eat away at that as opposed to the holding tank of the water heater. It is a consumable part. Generally, we see our customers get a year or two in between anode rod changes. It starts out about 3/4 of an inch by 12 inch. By the time it needs to be replaced, it's going to be about the size of a pencil and look very decrepit. Now, you can source a new one from any RV parts department. They are generally standard size, but go ahead and save your old one so you can match up the threads when you go ahead and take it back in. Now, when returning the unit back to service, it's very important that we do prime the water heater separate or pump 6 gallons of water into the unit before we start heating it. To do so, we're of course going to be replacing the anode rod. Make sure that we screw that on nice and tight. Again, you may need to give it a couple wraps of Teflon tape to make that watertight. But then we are going to repressurize the unit. So we're going to make sure that we have water flowing into the unit itself. And then we're again going to go to the hot side of that fixture. We're going to turn that on. Now we're going to see a slightly different scenario at this point. You're going to see a lot more water coming from the fixture, but you're also going to see a lot more air as well. What it's doing is it is displacing the air which has now filled the tank and replacing it with water. So it generally takes about 5 minutes, but once that flow normalizes at the fixture, that is your indicator that you do have 6 gallons of water within the tank and you can start heating that, whether that be with the 110 volt heating element, which we have the switch right there, or the propane switch, which we're going to find on the interior of the unit. Now also very important that we do protect this unit from mud daubers and flying insects, just like we do with all of our propane appliances. We're going to not only want to screen off these louvers, but this grating here as well. So just to kind of bring things full circle, when it does come to draining all of the water from the unit, whether that be for storage or winterization, we're going to start with the freshwater holding tank right up front if that's been in use. We're then going to go to the low point drains, remove those caps, let that drain. And lastly, we're going to wrap up here with the water heater following that draining procedure we just talked about. Our entry steps are going to be extended and retracted very easy. You just hold on dead center, go ahead and pull those out, and then you're going to flip that second step down. Very easy to do so. Same on the way up to pack those up. Of course, same thing in reverse. And it automatically kind of locks in there so it's not going to come down when you are driving down the road. Up top here, we of course have our awning. It is in. We're going to get to the operation of that when we do get to the inside. We do have your outside speakers here with your fancy blue lights. Again, we're going to get to those there on the inside. One thing I do want to point out here though is this is going to be your hood vent. This is if you're cooking a meal on the stovetop. This is where that hot air is going to exhaust. You do need to open and close this with use. So when you get to your campsite, make sure as you're setting it up, you do go ahead and pop this open. This is just held closed by some friction. And then in that same breath, when you're getting ready to pack up, to go back home or whatever, make sure you're closing this before you get on the road. That's going to keep any weather or road debris, dust, things like that from entering the unit from that location. And then down here, we have kind of an outside TV area. You can, of course, remove the TV and TV mount from the inside, carry it on out here. It does just slide in there at the top. And then, of course, you can power that TV with your all-weather 15 amp outlets here. And then we do have a pass-through cable connection here as well. What we see on the other side was going to be the inlet of those services. This is, of course, the outlet. So it is, again, just a pass-through connection to feed services to this location. Moving on, we have the other side of our storage compartment here. We have your table in there now. This is really going to be the best travel spot for that table, although there are a few places on the inside that you can keep it. Also, if we go ahead and turn this switch on, we can see we have that LED light in there that's going to run the full width of that storage compartment and light it up for use. And then, then we do have a second switch here. And what this does is you have two little, corner lights on the front of the camper. And what those do is they just essentially help light that tongue, whether you're hooking up propane or doing any battery maintenance after dark. That's just going to light that way. And then back here on the exterior of the compartment, we have a solar plug. What that's going to do is that's going to be a direct connection to the battery. That's going to be, if you want to use like a portable solar panel, you'll go ahead and make that connection here. It is essentially, again, a plug and play connection. We make our connection here. We directionalize our panel out in the sunlight, and it's going to, generally with those portable panels, they have the charge controller built directly into the panel. That's going to maintain that incoming voltage, make sure we're not overcharging the battery or things like that. But basically, it couldn't be easier to operate. It is essentially just a plug and play connection. Now that just about covers it here on the exterior of the vintage cruiser. We're going to hop on the inside and take a look at those appliances. Right inside the entry door here, we have our main switch cluster here. We're going to control quite a bit of the unit from this main panel here. If we take a look up at the top, we have our convenience center, as they call it. This is going to give us a real-time readout of where our tanks and battery is sitting in level of full. If we go ahead up and look up here, we have a couple of scales. The top one being for your tanks, and then the bottom one being for your battery. So if we test the battery, you have a couple indicators there. The more red lights you see, of course, the fuller it is. Tanks are there. So our freshwater tank is 2/3 full. Blackwater tank is empty. Gray water tank is empty. Down below that convenience center, we have your main lights throughout the unit. We have your accent lights here. That's going to be the blue under cabinet lights that we see on here on the interior. Our main lights are going to be just about all of our overhead ceiling lights. Our awning lights, we see those on the outside. Those are going to be on and off with that switch as well. And then we have a step light that is going to light the step there if the unit is at dark, so you know where you're walking there. And then we have our gas side of our water heater. We talked about that and how they separate the switches. The electric heating element is going to be right on the water heater itself, and then our propane side is going to be that top red lighted switch. And then our water pump, we also talked about that. That's going to be how we pressurize that fresh water holding tank and draw that water up to the fixtures to make it usable. And then all the way down here at the bottom, we have our slide in and out switch. We also talked about how to operate that properly. We're going to want to make sure we come fully in and go fully out, avoid short bursts or partial openings. And then we have our awning extend and retract switch there. So both of these are going to be momentary switches. Make sure we're holding those until we are satisfied. Moving on here to the other side of the door frame, we have a very important piece of safety equipment, which is going to be your fire extinguisher. Now with all of our safety equipment, which not only includes the fire extinguisher here, but also the 9-volt smoke alarm and the 12-volt propane LP leak detector, we want to test those every single time we take the unit out. In this case here, we're going to push this green tab down. If it springs back, that means we have life still in the unit. If it were to stay depressed, that means it's time to go ahead and pull that out and recycle it. Also moving into the unit further, here we have our fuse panel breaker box here. What we have on the right side is going to be our 12-volt blade style fuses. Now those are replaceable. It's going to be my recommendation to certainly keep some spares in each of those sizes. In the event that you're out there in the wild and one decides to burn out, you do of course have a spare fuse in its place. In terms of function, that is labeled there right beside those fuses. And then there on the left side, we have our 110 volt resettable breakers, same variant you're going to find in your breaker box at home. And again, those are resettable, labeled here on the left side. Up here on the ceiling, we not only have, of course, the overhead lights, speakers and some other things, but we do have our 9-volt smoke alarm. Now this is going to operate the very same way you're used to, of course, replaceable 9-volt battery. It's my ultimate recommendation that you do keep a spare with you in the event that it does start chirping at you while you are camping. The last thing you want to do is actually remove that battery to keep that from annoying you. So make sure you have a spare, again, in the event that it does need to be replaced, and also it does have a test tab like you're used to. Make sure we are testing this every single time we take the unit out. Moving on here to the refrigerator, standard Dometic style refrigerator and freezer. Our controls are going to be up top here. Now it is a very easy unit to navigate. Your main controls are just going to be 2 buttons on and off here. And then of course it will default into that auto mode. And on that auto mode, it's going to default to 110 voltage. And if that becomes interrupted at any time, it's going to automatically switch to gas. Now, if we do want to go ahead and run it in gas, we just depress that switch and it will start running on gas. Now, one thing to take note of is going to be this little slider here on those rear fins. What that is going to allow you to do is control temperature within both the freezer and the refrigerator. What we have down here on the floor is going to be your carbon monoxide LP leak detector. Now this is wired into the 12-volt section of the camper, so we don't have to worry about changing any batteries or anything like that. But we will want to test this every single time we take the unit out to make sure it is in good working order. And you're going to do that by pushing this button down here. It will indicate to you if it is sensing either carbon monoxide or LP with a series of light flashes and an audible tone. Moving up here, we have our Dometic thermostat. This is going to be for the furnace only. And then down below underneath the refrigerator, we have our blower motor. So all of our heat is going to come from that location. And when we go to operate the thermostat here, we have a top button to actually turn the unit on. That's going to be pushing that to the left if you're looking at it. And then we have a slider here which is going to choose our comfort level. Very easy. Once you click that on, it's going to start that blower motor immediately. 16 seconds after that, it actually ignites. By that 30-second mark, it's producing heat. One thing you may want to keep in mind, because of the proximity of the blower to the smoke alarm, is within that first 15 minutes of operation, it may set off that smoke alarm. It's unavoidable. It's just the nature of the appliance itself. So if that happens, it's nothing to be alarmed about if it is within that first 15 minutes of operation. In the restroom here, we not only have our light switch here that's going to control that overhead light, We of course have our toilet as well. Now this is going to be a pedal flush toilet, so it will be a light press on the pedal to fill that bowl with water. Good idea to always keep some water in the toilet bowl itself. What that's going to do is help keep those bad smells down when you do go ahead and flush. Also, it's going to be a full press to actually go ahead and flush that toilet. Now keep in mind also that the products that we use in those tanks and the toilet paper and things are going to be RV specific products. So RV specific single ply toilet paper is going to be used with this. Also, you're going to want to use an RV grade deodorizer, and maybe not a bad idea to again use an RV style tissue dissolver as well. Whatever products you do choose to use, make sure you are following the instructions on the specific product, and they will all generally be introduced from the toilet itself. So you'll generally just open up the valve and place your product down into the black water tank there. Turning around here, we of course have your medicine cabinet, sink, secondary light, kind of usual suspects. Above my head here, we do have a vent fan. This is going to help pull any moisture from the air, specifically when you are showering. So to open it up, of course, we just crank this up counterclockwise, and then we have a speed setting here. We can actually run that fan in both directions, whether that is to bring air in from the outside or again to exhaust air, moisture from the air, things like that. One thing you want to pay special attention to is make sure you are closing this all of the way before going down the road. I generally will make the joke that it's may or may not be there when you get to where you're going if you forget to close it. So make sure we close that nice and tight. And then last but not least, we have this large corner shower with the glass doors. Very efficient use of space for such a kind of a smaller bathroom. One thing to take note of is you do have a traditional camper sprayer here. What that means for you is it is going to have an on-off button here on the actual shower head. What that's going to allow you to do is choose a specific mixture here on the valve in terms of temperature, and then you can turn that head on and off to allow you to go ahead and conserve your water when you are specifically generally boondocking, or again, your 6-gallon capacity water heater doesn't generally translate to an exceptionally long shower. This is going to help maintain that hot water or overall water consumption. One thing to note as well is when you are going down the road, make sure you're going to close these doors, and then you have a little bungee here that fits over the handles to keep that from moving too much when you go down the road. In the kitchen here, we have a nice large single bay sink, of course with countertop extender. Other than that, of course, nothing too crazy with that. One thing to note here on the underside of the cabinetry, you have a push button style light, and then you have a couple switches here. One is going to be for the backlighting up top here on the cabinetry and the backlighting there. And then the other one is going to be for the blue lights on the speakers. We saw those on the outside, but the switch is actually located right here. And then also we have a couple USB chargers up there as well if you want to charge any devices from this location. Also, we have our cooktop here. Again, with that glass style or glass top countertop extender, you just go ahead and open it up. I love this nice cast iron grating they have with this particular unit. And it does have a built-in sparker igniter for not only the cooktop, but the oven as well. Very easy to operate. We turn the knob to high on the burners, and that will, of course, allow us to go ahead and light that up. Same with the oven, is you have the flame indicator there. You're going to just go ahead and turn this until you visually see that pilot down below. Once you've done so, you can go ahead and choose your temperature to let that start preheating. And then also you have a light here, which not only gives you the blue lights that we see around the knobs, but it also turns on the light for the oven as well. One thing to note, do make sure that if you are cooking on this for any amount of time, that we do allow that cast iron to go ahead and cool down before we ultimately close the lid here. And then above that, we have our kind of standard hood vent, which is going to provide us with a light as well as an exhaust fan. And we again already talked about that we need to open up that vent on the exterior of the unit when we do wish to vent that that heat from this location. And then we have our Greystone microwave here. Not too terribly much to speak of with this particular unit. It's a turntable style microwave, the same variant that most people have used for many, many years. Is going to have some presets up top, time and temperature down below, defrost options, power options, things like that. And then we have our drive unit here. This is going to be CD, DVD, AM, FM radio, Bluetooth. All of those features are going to be used on this particular unit. Power button is here, and of course it kicks us right there into Bluetooth mode. If we want to go ahead and actually pair to it, we do need to hold this Bluetooth button down. We have a couple options here, zone 1 and 2. Zone 1 is going to be the inside of the unit. Those speakers are located on the overhead, the ceiling, and then we have some radio presets there. Our main mode button is here. That's going to take us through the options in terms of devices. And then this is of course going to be a radio seek button as well. Here we have your air conditioner up top here. If we go ahead and look here at the dial, we're going to see a slow, medium, and high fan speed. Here on the right is going to be your fan only speed, and then there on the other side we are going to have the same fan speeds but with conditioned air. And then we have a thermostat within the setting to control temperature even further. We have different options to directionalize that, whether that's going to be the underside louvers here or louvers front, back, left, or right. Now also keep in mind that this is going to contain a filter in it, and that is underneath these slotted dots here. So we go ahead and get a flat bladed screwdriver, kind of lightly pry that piece of plastic out of the way. You're going to find that netted filter. It is a washable filter. Go ahead and remove it, rinse it off in the sink, allow it time to dry, and then just insert it the way you removed it. Replace this white piece of plastic, and you're going to be good to go. Jackknife sofa here, very easy to operate. Of course, you see it in the couch position. That goes without saying, even though I just said it. But then we're going to go ahead and lift up here on the front, and I find it easier if not only if I lift up, but if I kind of help the back down as well. It's going to go ahead and pivot there in the middle and then lay out flat there for a secondary sleeping area. And then again, very easy to go ahead and lift up. And again, I find like I've reached this point here and I need to kind of bend back and actually help that back into that couch position there. Emergency exit here can be found on the driver's side of the unit. In the event that your entry door were to be blocked, you surely can exit the unit from this location. And it does also operate as a regular window. So if you kind of hold back on this black tab there, that will free up this arm. Now, if we were operating it as a traditional window, it's going to be a single position window. And that's what you see there. In the event of emergency, you can go ahead and yank this screen out of the way. That window is going to open fully, kind of like a doggy door, and again, allow you to exit the unit from that specific location. Other than that, here in the bedroom area, we do have our underbed storage. You do have your water tank housed under there, but other than that, it is open for storage. And then looking here up top of the bed, we have these pendulum lights. They do come on blue to kind of set the mood, and then if you hold them for a couple seconds longer, they are going to turn to that bright white LED. Well, that just about covers it here on the 19 CSK. We do hope you enjoyed that walkthrough. If you do have any questions or concerns, please don't hesitate to comment below or give us a call. Thank you so much for your time. All right, hold on. Don't look at me. Man, I should buy a boat. Oh. Okay, start over. From the top. Action.